Hi, I'm Owen from Rask Australia. Thanks for tuning in to the Rask Network. Before we get into today's show, there are a few things we have to go over. Firstly, what you're about to hear and see is limited to general information only. It's not personal financial advice like you'd get from a financial planner. Also, it's important to remember that past performance is not indicative of future performance. That means that anything that's happened in the past, or we say today, is not necessarily going to reflect what happens in the future. Lastly, please consider that any of the guests or myself are featuring on this program may have a financial interest in some of the products or shares mentioned. That's enough from me. I hope you enjoyed today's program. Al, thanks for taking some time out to join me for this, I guess, very special interview with you, mate.
Happy to be here.
We're going to talk about business. We're going to talk about probably investing is going to be brought up, so that's going to be a bit of fun. And I'm sure you have some really important lessons to be learned from your own experience, which you can depart with for our listener base and our viewers. I realized that coming into this, and when we set up this meeting about a month ago, that as far as I could tell, no one's really covered this ground with you. And I feel like what you've created is so special that I'm pretty stoked to be having this chat, mate.
Yeah, so am I. It's a lot of fun, yeah.
Cool. So I guess because this is a business-focused discussion, I pretty much just want to pick your brain about the journey that you went on to start the business. And I guess some of the advice that you would have for other people out there who are looking to start a business, whether that's a startup, like a technology startup, or whether it's a business, it could be whatever. But maybe just to set the scene, I know that you were a naval architect before you started your thing, but I think your journey towards technology and having your own business started long before then. So maybe you can just tell us a bit about yourself growing up, some of the things you did in your early teens and late teens that kind of led you on this journey.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try and keep it short because I can talk forever on that. I actually recently we do these things at St. Paul Street called AMAs where people like have a session on their life story. So I kind of went over this quite recently with the whole team and it was
Cool.
pretty fun. So so I'll keep it short. I guess the most important thing is when I was growing up, my parents, especially my mum, were quite anti-technology, screens, computers, things like that. So for example, we had a computer at home, but we were only allowed to use it for sort of 1 hour a day. So it was a bit restricted, and I think I was really interested in it, but I didn't really feel like I got to really get into it. When I was growing up, another thing that's kind of interesting to know is that I'm quite dyslexic. So I struggled quite a lot at school. I think that certainly I remember when I was younger, coming up to age 10, my image of myself was I was not a smart kid, right? I think this is actually more common than people appreciate, that if you're in school and you're constantly getting answers wrong, getting low test scores, you form a self-image that you're not really that smart. And I think that's quite dangerous because then you just stop trying, right? And or even go as far as saying, oh, well, I better not, I better not speak up. What if I'm wrong? And it's embarrassing. So it's quite, I was like a very shy kid, and I didn't really have, I believe myself to not be very intelligent. The school I was at, we lived abroad when we were younger. We weren't in England, but the school I was at was an international school. It wasn't a great school for people with learning difficulties. And so my parents made a really hard decision to send me to a boarding school in the UK. And the important thing about this boarding school was that they had a computer room and that the parents were not around. And they had all these computers, very old ones. The computers had no games on them, but there were lots of books about how to program. And I kind of found like a sanctuary in this computer room, I guess, because it was like a safe space. And I just, with other people, of course, just learned to program, and we just made games. And it was cool because if you made a great game, we weren't the only ones who wanted to play games. All the other kids at the school also wanted to play games. And so it was kind of like a little sort of proof that you built something great, that people could come and play your game. And I guess, again, really cutting stuff short, as I got more into computers and making games, anyone who's made a game knows it's mostly about math. And so it started to make me appreciate math. And I started to realize that, hey, I actually can do this. I can do math. Like it kind of gave me an interest in it. And from the age of like 11 to probably 14, 15, I went from being in the lowest, what will be called class at math, to the highest class, because I suddenly had a interest in it. And actually, and I was like, oh, wow, I really need to learn trigonometry because I want to make a ball bounce around the screen, things like that. And so then I was really just, my entire childhood I was just a real computer geek, I guess. Like I just obsessed with computers. That's all I wanted to do. I just was obsessed with building things, programming. And when the internet came along, I think I was 14. And that was when I released my first, as you might call it, like app, although we didn't call them apps in those days. And it was this Windows shell replacement, which I won't go into what that was, but that at the time was actually crazy popular. It had like 100,000 downloads. And so even at that age, I was like kind of obsessed with building things and getting them out there, and I guess, changing things. And so it was only when I kind of got to age 18 that I sort of started, maybe I'm going to say, discovered the rest of the world. And that was what led me to naval architecture, because actually the logical thing, if you're a computer geek, would be to go study computer science, right? But I didn't really want to. I think deep down, I felt that I was already kind of a geek. And if I went to study computer science, I'd continue to be a geek. So therefore, I wanted to study something different. I think that was probably really what was going on. I also loved building furniture and design, so there wasn't totally random. I went to study architecture, didn't particularly like architecture because there was not much academic side to it. Then I went to study something called naval architecture, which is designing boats. And the good thing about that course is it's entirely math, so it really pushes your math ability. Again, very long story short, after I graduated, I came to Australia because I'm really big into surfing and windsurfing. So I wanted somewhere that was warm and windy.
You're a bit of a champion, I hear, mate.
Yeah, I did. I got very into windsurfing. There's a theme here of obsession, I guess. And so came to Australia, started working at the time in Perth. There was this huge oil and gas boom. So you literally could just walk around and you get a job. So started working in oil and gas there. And that was also when I really started to invest. So I was always interested in the stock market. It always fascinated me. And as I started to teach myself to invest, I started to just be kind of, I guess you could say, disappointed with how the websites worked, how the services worked, and why the whole experience was just so difficult, yet you had this great technology that could make it easier. And also one thing I would point was I was starting businesses very young as well. My first business was when I was 16, designing websites for parents at school, which was a pretty easy way to make money. And so I started work in Perth, started investing, and I was very actively thinking I want to start a business. So I think we'll probably get this later in the podcast, but I was like, okay, I want to start a business. I was playing with a lot of ideas. And one of these ideas that I was experimenting with a lot was this idea of something to help people that, who want to invest in stocks, solving problems there. And the more I investigated it, the more it just started to really shine as something with big potential. And there came a point where I said, I think I'm ready to do this. And I was just waiting for a kind of a catalyst. And for me, the catalyst was an accelerator program, which is really a kind of startup thing. But there was an accelerator program that started in Sydney, and I guess I got in fairly easily because by then I already built an app. So I was quite far ahead of everyone else. And so that was how I ended up in Sydney. And that's where the Simply Wall Street journey started.
You're right in saying that you've cut a lot short there. I feel like there's so much in there, mate. One of the things that's really common, though, is this thread of entrepreneurship that goes through people's lives. I find that, you might have experience with this, but I find that oftentimes the most successful business people start isn't the first one. And so I find that there's a certain, I guess, something in someone's personality that lends themselves to doing this. Did you come out to Australia by yourself when you first came out?
I came out with a partner, but I did come out, for example, without a job. And at the time, everyone was like, "Oh, that's so risky. You can't go out without a job." And like, sure, you can. So I did have a partner at the time who we came out with, but it didn't feel very risky, if that makes sense.
So that's funny, right? Because a lot of people would think that that's something that's extremely risky, to go across the other side of the world and just go without a job. You enjoy surfing, yeah, great, but where does the money come in? But I guess you knew that you had this technical ability. How about like starting those businesses earlier on? Do you think that you would be where you are today without starting those businesses?
Well, I actually think it's, to your point, it's even deeper, I think, than just starting businesses. And I think a lot of people, when they start a business, what you really have to be doing is asking yourself, what do I want out of this business? Like, what am I actually doing? Because I actually think that most entrepreneurs don't think about it as a business per se. I think they just think about it as something that they're deeply interested in and something they want to change. So I actually kind of think that the foundations of entrepreneurship are basically doing things. I know it sounds really silly, but just getting up and doing stuff, like doing interesting things that you don't have to do. Like, these things are entirely optional. You can get away without doing them. It's only the people that do them that make it, that change things. So there's like this whole thing of what I just call being proactive, but yeah, just doing these things. And then there's this concept of, a belief that things can be different. I think that's also important. So I think it starts there. I haven't figured it out, but there's probably something in, early childhood that sort of builds that. I don't know. I can try and think of things that I did, but there's lots of other entrepreneurs who have different backgrounds. And then I think, as people grow up, they start to say, oh, hey, this is actually a career path of sorts, that I can actually do this as well. Like, I don't have to take a job. And to your point, the really big difference, in my opinion, between entrepreneurs naturally is that to an entrepreneur, the riskier option is the predefined career. The riskier option is not going to Australia, because that scares them. That's them saying, oh God, but I'll never get my chance to do this. So that exactly sort of is like differentiates those two people, right? So for me, if I wasn't going to Australia, I would have been freaking out, because I'd be like, well, I want to be doing something. Likewise, I wanted to start a business. I knew I was going to do it. The risky part to me was not doing it. Does that make sense?
Totally. I feel like I had a very similar feeling at the time when I kind of went on my journey, which was I had an itch that I had to scratch. And if I didn't do it, then I would probably live with regret. It's kind of that regret minimization framework, I guess. If I don't do it now, when will I do it? And I really wanted to take that. You mentioned the name of your business, Simply Wall Street. By now, millions of people around the world are familiar with it. But at the time, right, it was an idea, and you say that there was this incubator. Can you tell us a bit about, obviously you must have had the technical skills to build a tech platform like this, but can you tell us a bit about why the incubator was so important for you to get started?
Well, one thing I'll point out is that I was working on it as a sort of side hustle for like a year and a half before. Do you know what I mean? The incubator was what gave me the confidence to quit my job and go full power into it, I guess. And that's one thing I would say, like, best advice I can give to start your business is do it now and do it on the side. You don't need to quit a job to do it. Of course, it's beneficial and you get more time, but you can do a huge amount on the side, especially if you have a very easy job. So to your point, I was already working on it for a long time. Actually, this is crazy. You can find all the videos online if you know where to look. But a guy recently was tweeting about them, a friend of mine in Perth. But when I first had the idea, I kind of knew it was an idea, as in I knew it was an experiment. So I called it NinjaVest, as in I purposely gave it a temporary name because I believe names actually aren't that important in the grand scheme of things. And then when I was experimenting with it, a friend of mine, a girl called Andrea, she came up with the idea, hey, why don't you call it Simply Wall Street? And I was like, actually, that's a great name. It's so simple. So that's where the name came from. And then the incubator, it definitely was important. I think it would have been challenging to start the business without it. they didn't really give you much advice, to be frank. But the important thing is they gave you some investment. And for our business, when you really want to make a platform, you need financial data. And there's only two ways you can get it. You can either buy it or you can scrape it. And the problem with scraping the data is it might get you some way, but it's very unlikely that it's going to be reliable, and it's very unlikely that people are going to pay for it, you know, as a platform, which is obviously the goal. And the data fees are pretty pricey. So effectively, the 100,000 that came from the incubator effectively went straight onto the data fees to get us started. Now, luckily, we worked with Standard & Poor's, and they gave us a very kind of friendly startup deal that kind of grew with us. So that was really the catalyst, because it let us sort of start to take things pretty seriously. And it was good. They did help with other things, like setting up, to your point, setting up the business and all this stuff. But yeah, it was a fairly hands-off incubator, to be frank. Yeah.
I might get you to just drill in on that point, but also explain it to us. For people that don't have either investing or a tech background, to explain what Simply Wall Street is, like the vision that you had for it, but then why that data was important and how you built it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, the vision for the business is all about helping individual investors invest in stocks, which is exactly a problem that I faced, and I guess I still face it, to be. So that's a whole interesting problem in itself. What I realized was that there really wasn't something that actually helped people. And there's lots of services that appear to help people invest, but they're not really helping them. And I actually believe that individuals can invest effectively in stocks, and it is a learning process. And so that's what we want to help people with. And so Simply Wall Street takes financial data, so that's where that's important. And the financial data on its own isn't particularly useful to an individual investor. It's very complicated. You don't really know what to look at. There's heaps of websites which will dump data on you, but it will probably make your investing experience worse. What we do is we analyze that data in a way that is suitable for long-term type approach to investing, which is what we believe works for individuals. And then we also present it in a way that's easy to understand. And that's the other problem, is not only do individuals not have access to information, their knowledge levels are generally a bit lower. And so what we try to do is present the important parts in a way that's easy to understand and really focused in on the company. And we really believe that when you're thinking about investing, you should be thinking that I'm just buying a share in this business. I'm becoming a shareholder in the business. That's that. If you have that mindset, you massively simplify investing. You're not trying to time the market. You're not trying to do all this crazy stuff. And so that's what we're trying to do. Now, if we didn't have the good quality financial data, that's the basis. Like, that's where everything starts. So yeah, it was pretty critical.
So that kind of information discovery process for people is quite difficult. But let's just imagine it's not investing, which is kind of our forte, or tech, which is your forte. Imagine it's any business, is, I guess, just finding out what you need to do in the first place. But I guess your lead time, that 18 months, gave you a chance to really sit down and plan and think. Did you have this kind of great big document where you had a business plan and how you would monetize and when? Or were you kind of more, I guess, agile, to use a phrase, and just kind of respond to things as they go?
I did have documents. Yeah, I did. I definitely had plans. It was looking back, you're still extremely naive in all respects, you know, so things that are theoretically easy to build. So yeah, to your point, I'd done quite a lot of work, or what I believe to be a lot of work, on like what the product should look like. I think relatively speaking, I had done a lot of work, but in hindsight, I actually wished I'd done a lot more work. You know, I was obsessed with this book called The Lean Startup, but that book's good as a starter, but it doesn't go anywhere near deep enough, you know. And so, so I had that part sort of vaguely in my mind. There's one thing to be said, that for most businesses, the founders generally solving their own problem. Okay. And so as long as they solve their own problem somewhat well, and there's enough people that share that problem, that's the sort of genesis of any business. Most businesses often fall down because either they didn't solve the problem in the first place, or no one else shared the founder's problem. So that's a way of sort of initially shortcutting, I guess, a lot of this stuff, because if you built something that is useful for you, then as long as people share it, it's useful for them. But yeah, I had plans, but they were, that's the best thing when you're only like 3 people. You can be super agile and you can, but we broadly followed the plan for the first 6 months. I have to admit, I think I had sort of an internal gateway after that 6 months, which was, once we launched this, let's actually see if anyone uses it. And luckily they did. So that was sort of my first gateway of like, hey, this is actually, there's really something here,
So when you built this app in that 6 month, I guess, gateway, did you have like a viable product, like minimum viable product by then? Or was it was, as far as I know, it's kind of just a free platform for people to use at the time?
Yeah, it was totally free. It was extremely minimal. We cut every corner you could possibly cut. Yeah, it was extremely basic. And that's actually one of the sort of interesting things that you have with technology businesses, at least. Like, you want to start with a minimal viable product, but then the problem is, if it's successful, you're like, whoa, holy shit! Like, so I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on there, but you're like, whoa, this thing cannot be scaled. And what we actually did is we did try to scale it. Right. And so we actually sort of scaled up the MVP for the next pretty much 2 years, until it's sort of like not saying a house of cards, but you just couldn't scale it anymore. Like, we wouldn't have even been able to hire anyone who wanted to work on it, if that makes sense. So that's probably a nuance of a technology business, I would say. But starting with the minimal product is definitely the route to go. Anything more and you might get lucky, but most likely you'll learn more by releasing something that's unfinished and unready, but you'll learn if you're on the right path. So I think that would also apply to any business. I can't think of a business where that wouldn't apply.
I tend to agree with you. Sometimes, I think it's Bezos that said this, like, sometimes you can have these really complex problems, but you just need to start. You can plan and plan and plan, but sometimes you just need to start. And one of the things that's on your LinkedIn profile, and I said I wasn't going to quote this verbatim, but one of the things that you said is, success is 100% about execution, not ideas, but done is better than perfect. And I feel like, well, that's something for me. Done is definitely better than perfect. But I tend to agree with you on that one. Like, sometimes you just need to get started to see if people like it. And your idea earlier on about not testing the water with both feet, kind of testing it with 1 foot at a time, that's a Warren Buffett quote, is just to give it a shot as a kind of like a side hustle, if you like, or start it from there. So I feel like one of the things that I should ask you is, if you look back on it now, to those early days until now, were there any really important decisions that you made, either good or bad, and kind of things that you would have done differently? Not just for your business, I guess, but just generally speaking, even if you had some tidbits there.
What would I have done differently? That's a really good question. I
don't often have self-reflection like this, so I'm just putting you on the spot here.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because we made a lot of mistakes, but at the same time, you need to make those mistakes. That's how you learn. So I wouldn't say, I don't want to make them, if that makes sense. I think I could have been even more customer obsessed. That sounds silly, but I really think that could have been done even earlier, and we would have sort of, I guess, had a better product faster, frankly.
How weren't you customer obsessed? Like, what would you have done better? How would you have done
that? So, for example, like really early on, what we used to do, my original co-founder and I, we used to like print out mock-ups of how what we would call the company report or research report would look. And we would go to these like investing conferences and test it with people and ask them if it was useful. So it's like the most simple possible form. Now that was one thing we could have done. We did that well, I think, and we learned what was working, and we changed stuff. I think once we launched the MVP, rather than rush off and keep building features. We made one huge mistake we made was we built what people asked for. And that's a very common mistake. It's very tempting that you get all these emails, people saying, "Oh, I love what you guys are building. Could you build this?" And you think, "Oh, this is easy. We'll just build what the most commonly requested feature is." And then you end up with like a kind of, I'm trying to think of a good terminology, but you just end up with a completely mishmash, muddled product that makes no sense. And so especially for consumers, I'm not saying people can't give you great ideas, they can, but the process needs to be understand the problem. So when someone tells you, "Oh, can you build X?" what you need to understand is, why do they want X? So that was a big mistake that we just, as soon as we launched, we just sort of rushed off and just built what people were asking for. What we should have done is paused and done more reflection on what the people's problems were, and probably built a bit slower and a bit more thoughtfully. So that was one thing. But at the same time, it's a lesson. It's part of the fun. So, you have to make some mistakes. So I think what else would be an interesting one.
Did the business go through any experiences, what I would call NDE, near-death experience, or anything like that? Did you have any major hiccups along the way?
I was sort of, touch wood, where is it? I would say actually no. I would say lots of my friends, because this is a great thing. One great thing about these incubators or accelerators is that you're with a lot of other founders, so you do get to share in the kind of journey. We didn't have anything that bad, I would say. We definitely had times where we were running out of money, and and luckily we managed to raise money in time. Otherwise, we'd have had to let a few people go. So, for example, like the first fellow that we actually hired was our CTO, Jabin, and he needed to work, right? So he needed a salary, and so he actually he kind of said to us, "Hey guys, like either we work together or I have to find a job." And we were like, "Well, we better hire him." So we actually hired him before we had really enough money. We had enough money for a few months, I think, but then luckily we were able to raise money. So it's all these kind of connected pieces, right? Because if you don't hire people, you can't grow, you can't do things. So yeah, it's funny. So no, I think touch wood, I wouldn't say near-death experience to me is like, really scary, kind of having to let a lot of people go, or imminent crash. So no, we'd never had that.
Okay, let's hope you don't. I'm touching the wood down here for you.
Yeah, I'm touching the fake wood. Yeah.
So, okay, then. So you mentioned there, like raising capital from investors, and one of the questions that a lot of people face, particularly in tech, but also just in every business, I guess, is like, how do you fund the dream? And I think the more, obviously it's catch-22, because the bigger you get, the easier it becomes, because you have a demonstrable track record or whatever, and a product that works and what have you. In the early days, so I'm guessing you got a big cash from the incubator, but did you decide to fund like your team at the beginning? Did you guys decide to fund it yourself, kind of just bootstrap it? Or did you go externally? Did you find the family, friends and fools kind of thing, or faithful, I should say?
Funding's a super interesting question. I mean, I think sort of generally speaking, funding for some reason is thought of as a measure of success. I think that's a mistake. I think if possible, and if you can do something without funding, you should, generally speaking. And I think people, what they forget is that early on in any business, generally speaking, unless it's maybe a more like a bricks and mortar business, the funding is usually going on people, and it's going on salaries, and so therefore it's going on time. Okay, and there's a lot of other ways of accessing time than funding. So, for example, I would always say initially, unless the founders, maybe it's a second business or maybe there's a special situation, but one thing founders can invest in their business is their time. Okay, and so, for example, we went for more than 2 years, maybe 2.5, without paying ourselves a salary. And even the first salary for the first few years was extremely low. Like it was, was probably less than working in a cafe. So so that was our investment, if that makes sense. Now, this is something that I planned out. So I'd purposely been saving beforehand because, as I said, I was planning to start a business. So it wasn't a surprise. So that also helped me because I was a bit more comfortable. I also, when I was running the business initially in Sydney, I lived in my van in a car park. So I didn't have to pay any rent. So I didn't pay any rent. So I had all these things set up so that I didn't, so that basically money wasn't a problem, because of course this is a challenging thing. If money becomes a problem, you're not going to be able to do great work. So you really need to get yourself set up so that you can basically focus and do good work on your business, whatever that takes, whether it's support from friends, or maybe, moving back in with your parents. I don't know, whatever it takes, you got to figure it out in your situation. So the initial funding for businesses, I generally think the friends and family is quite a bad idea. That's just my personal opinion. I think that you've already got a family relationship, and then, you borrow money off someone, or I think it's sort of a bit of a recipe for disaster. But I know it's quite common in the US, for example. You are not going to easily be able to raise money for your business without a track record, without traction, right? So you have to get that first. Like whatever it is, you got to prove. And this is the funny thing. A lot of founders like, I can't raise money. No one's going to give me money. But the founders are going to be investing their own time for years, right? So all we really have as humans is time. So they should also want to get traction to make sure that this is a worthwhile thing to invest their own time into. So it works both ways. Like you want to be sure that you're going to say, hey, I'm going to dedicate 2 years of my life or whatever it's going to take to this business. You want to be pretty damn sure. You want to have had some traction beforehand that this is something that's going to be worthwhile. And so if you have traction, you can raise money. I think that works together. So the first step is getting that traction, whatever your business is.
At the 6-month mark for you, if you hadn't have seen the growth that you did, would you have been able to pull up stumps or walk away from it?
I mean, I'm a pretty determined person. So I like to think I would, but other sort of important skill that all founders need is perseverance. Yeah. So I don't know. But at the same time, you hear a lot of founders who have probably persevered for too long and the writing was on the wall and just wasn't working and they just can't see it. So it's a balance, I think so. I think the other thing is, which is a common term in startup land, is something called a pivot, where you might say, hey, look, this first thing didn't work. But we've learned this on our journey. And so this is a better opportunity. And there's heaps of businesses that are extremely successful. For example, Slack, Stuart Butterfield, they were building some kind of game. And whilst they were building the game, they were talking, I believe, on IRC, and they built, so that was a classic, totally different direction. So that was probably what we would have done is sort of thought, hey, what else have we learned and spotted as an opportunity? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Like, that's a good thing.
Absolutely, it is. So bring us up to now, Al. I've been around you long enough now to know kind of what the business does and how good it is. Can you give us some high-level facts about the business and I guess how your day has changed from years ago to now? Like, what's your average day look like, and what role do you fill in the business?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. I'm not allowed to program anymore.
Which is good. Are you off the tool?
I'm not a good programmer, dude. I can program to make things like work, but behind it is like I don't know if you've ever seen that meme where there's like a nice facade and behind the facade there's like stuff holding it up. That's my programming. But luckily I don't do that anymore. Although I do enjoy programming, but I'm banned from doing that. Now my role, how it's changed. So originally I was very hands-on, right? So writing a lot of the original code, obviously hiring, raising money, doing a lot of the growth work. Like one of the first kind of like growth bots I wrote in Excel, bizarrely, because it was just so easy. But But now the way my day looks is I'm mostly just communicating and with people, with the team, and just spending a lot of time, I guess, just talking. So it's funny because I have 2 days a week, which I have, and you're on one of them now, which is so that's why we can get this time, which are like no meeting days. So it's just time to myself. But the other days I'm just just talking with the rest of the team, with the rest of the team leads, and working on. I still mostly work on the product and help the product teams out with that. And then hiring still takes a lot of time. So, every time we hire someone, I'm especially towards the end quite involved in that.
I feel humbled that you've given me this time, mate.
No, I like this stuff. It's fun. So, it's
totally. So you try and separate your days. So what do you do? So on your days off, you just chat with the team and kind of get amongst it and answer questions and strategize and that, I'm guessing.
Well, those are on the days on.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. The days off will be if there's something I need to, think a bit more deeply about, or often there might be work that I might review, or, something where I might want to go in slightly deeper on. Sometimes we'll have a longer session. So sometimes I believe in problems that are hard to solve. You do need to spend a lot of time really thinking about them. And so that's a great opportunity to, you're not, if you have like a sort of, let's have a half an hour meeting to figure this out, you're not going to figure it out. You need unlimited, sort of time where you're not, we're not running out of time. You just need to spend time. So, but that's a part of the job that I love. Like I love working with people. That's, I think, something that is important. That you're still, I'm still working, but it's work that I love. That's probably the same with you. I think that's one of the reasons that most people do want to start their own business. And even if the business isn't sort of like wildly successful, I don't think it matters, because what you gain is freedom and being able to work on something that you love rather than something that you hate. Yeah,
there's a lot of utility in running your own business, which is why I think we have so many small businesses in Australia and indeed the world. So just are you able to offer us any high level stats about Simply Wall Street today to give people a sense of the scale?
Yeah, sure. Stats. So we have, I think, like 2.3, 2.4 million users. User would be someone who creates an account. We do over 5 million in annual recurring revenue, so quite profitable. We have a team of 26, which is growing a lot. We're going to be about to hire a lot more people, so keep an eye out on that. One thing we did early on, which was definitely the right decision, was we covered international markets rather than just Australia. So our original markets that we covered were Australia, UK, and the US. Now we cover every market in the world. And I think, again, with software, it sounds silly, but that's such an obvious choice, because the same software, it can be offered to everyone. And I love the idea of being able to help people who normally wouldn't be able to get help with investing. And so many of the investing tools are just based on the US, and then people like Australia or New Zealand or India or all these countries have to wait years to have it released in their country, whereas we're doing the opposite. It's available everywhere. So so we cover every listed company in the world, and we're available in every country in the world, which is cool. Cool. Any other stats?
The reason why I asked that, right, is because I want to know how it makes you feel to know that, I'm just going to use round figures, over 2 million people have created an account on something that you created. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I do it. I mean, I think that's fundamentally the same feeling as building a computer game and having people play it back at school when I was 12. I think it's the same thing. So I think, that's what it's all about. And hopefully for those 2 million people or more, I'm hopeful that we can help all of them with their investing. And that's what, that was the problem that I had. And I believe that that's what we can do. And with this huge amount more scope there's a lot more people to help. There's a lot more people investing. So that's what's so exciting about it.
Did you think, like I guess the math brain aside, just calculating exponential growth or what have you, that aside, did you think that you would be where you are today with the business back when you started it? Or was that kind of like wildest expectations, like best outcome, or where did that kind of sit, I guess? Where does it sit?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, right? Because one of the things I did before I started was I spent a lot of time researching who else was out there, and was anyone else anywhere near doing what I was thinking of doing, or who are the competitors? And as you know, there are big competitors in the space, and they've been around for 20, 30 years. And these companies are huge and they make a huge amount of money. But yet those are the products that I was using that were not helping me. So to me, it was straightforward, because they already were these huge businesses with suboptimal products. And so if you just made a good product that actually helped people, it seemed obvious that you could be as big as them, if not far bigger. But that being said, yeah, I have, obviously, when you first start, we like, for example, we didn't charge money for the first year and a half for the product, right? Because it was just too basic, and we hadn't even built a system to do that. We were happy enough just to have that people would even pay for it. So it goes in stages, so hitting our first 1,000 subscribers was a big milestone for us, and then you're thinking, oh God, do you think we'll ever get to 10,000, 100,000, etc. So, it's cool because, yeah, I think people's ambitions grow, I think the fundamentals was always something that was clear to me. I don't think that's changed. And, I think we're going at it. One thing I would say is that I think founders are extremely naive with like how long things will take. So totally. It was like, 3 years, that'll be fine, easy. Like 6 years later, still haven't done some of the really basic stuff that we do. But that's a common theme with every startup. Like if you look at, there's a really great blog from Melanie from Canva, and she talks about lots of the things in her original pitch deck for Canva, and they still haven't done it, but yet they're one of Australia's best businesses. So yeah, it's one of those things. I feel like there's this vast majority of people in between who know a little bit about founder life and starting a business, and they're like the vast majority. They don't do it. It's the people who either know everything there is to know about business or close to it, who are like experts in their field. For them, it makes sense to start a business. But then there's this other tail, and I think I'm in this other tail where I kind of it was like me being naive that led me to just pull the trigger and go and do it. And I think there's obviously that's just a generalization, but I think you kind of have to, in one hand, be a bit naive to the risks, because otherwise maybe you wouldn't do it. Absolutely.
So I've got some questions here, mate, that are more along the lines of specific areas of business that you could lend some insights to. And so the first one is kind of that origination piece around starting a business, specifically whether it's in Australia, New Zealand. I mean, it could apply globally, but specifically Australia and New Zealand. Did you set up the business, and I'm going to use air quotes here, legitimately? Like, did you set it up as a company structure from the get-go, or was it kind of like, let's just go with an idea, build a product, and then see what happens?
Well, my advice there would be focus on what I would call product market fit, but I would just focus on finding something that people want, focus on a problem. When you set the business up has zero bearing, right? You can set the business up straight away. It will make you feel nice and warm inside because you've made some progress and you've got a nice, ABN, etc. But it's not gonna. You've got no closer to actually solving anyone's problems. So I sort of generally would just wait as long as possible for that. And you can do most things as a sole trader if you really want. It's only. I think that being said, if you're going to put some of your own money into it, which you might need to, or take other money, then of course you need to set it up. I mean, also setting up a business, you can just do it online for things like $500 and basic shareholders agreement. So these things are they're not the thing that should be concerned. If those are the things that are concerning you when you're starting, then maybe that's a good time to think, hey, what am I doing this for? If you just want the word founder on your LinkedIn profile, just put it on there. I think it's you really got to focus on what you actually want to be solving.
it's that product, you said product market fit. You know, I mean, maybe I'll let you explain that. But for me, it was like, we can see a need here. Let's just go out and solve that first. And yeah, we might make mistakes with that stuff later. But, you know, I think there's an element of move fast and break things, but it's kind of just focus on the end user and make their experience better and better. So can you explain the concept of product market fit and then how your growth strategy from a marketing perspective fed into that?
Well, I mean, product market fit, yeah, that's just a sort of startup lingo. It simply is just meaning that you're solving problems for people. So it applies to any business. You know, I think you mentioned someone else you had on the podcast who started a cake shop. Well, that's still solving a problem, right? The problem is probably getting great cakes, I imagine. So it's exactly the same thing. So you got to really focus on that. And the great thing is, whatever you do, you can usually boil that part down to be something really simple that, again, you can actually test, or what would be known as validate, before you pull the trigger and rent an office, go get your business registered, get shareholders agreements, so that you can actually test this stuff first. That's the whole point. So that's really all I'd be getting at there. And I would even say you could probably wait as long as possible to really make sure that that's working. You know, if you were, say, doing a podcast, maybe you could do that on the side for a few months and build up those subscriber numbers and really make sure you've got it nailed and understanding what your niche is. And then you could create. It's fairly straightforward. I think, that there's a book called The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, who effectively explains the basics of this.
Cool. I'll put it in the show notes. How about when it comes to marketing, mate? Obviously you don't need to lift the lid too much, but maybe just how, like, I think for you, right, I think I know what you're going to say. Like, obviously you're selling a product online, a service for people, so it makes sense to use a digital medium. Is there anything, I guess, you'd want to add on that?
Well, I think this interesting thing with marketing, it really depends on your business, right? There's some businesses where paid marketing will make sense. There's some businesses where organic will make sense. There's some businesses where it's purely a word of mouth, you know. So hopefully before you start, one of the things you should really be doing is thinking, who else is successful here and how are they doing it and what channels are working for them? And you should try to understand the basic concept of not necessarily just marketing, but what I would call growth in general, growing your business. So if it's a podcast or, say, a YouTube channel, you'd want to understand, well, hey, who else is doing really well and what is it that they're doing? And the thing is, nowadays, this is so heavily written about online. There's effectively playbooks for like every different vertical that you might want to go into. Now, yeah, to your point, in our space, we're on the web, and it's a consumer-facing business. We don't do marketing in the traditional sense. So people discover us what's called organically, right? And so a big channel for us, for example, would be SEO. Now, an SEO is not a channel that you can switch on and switch off. If you want to do that, you just have to buy the ads. That's like the short-term way of doing it. So one thing to consider when you start your business is, what I would do, I would list every possible channel that you can think of to grow your business. And then I would rank them in terms of how quickly you think you can do it, how confident you think it is, and how much impact it will have. And so one of the things that we did when we first launched Simply Wall Street is Nick and I went to our inboxes, we downloaded every contact, and we sent an email out to them. Sounds pretty simple, but I think the total number was like almost 3,000 people, right? So yeah, cool. Then we got 3,000 people onto the product. Okay, not 3,000, we probably got about 400 because of the click rate. But if someone gets a personal email from a friend, yeah, they're probably going to open it, you know. So that was a simple one. You can't repeat that. I can't email them again in 2 weeks' time, but why would I not do it initially to it's like a low risk thing. One final thing I'll add is I'm generally not a fan of PR for businesses. I don't think there's anything wrong with it when you get started, but the thing with PR people don't appreciate is it's not repeatable. And I think you need to understand this concept of repeatable channels, ones that it's not a once-off thing. PR is almost impossible to repeat unless you have some kind of unique special data source that you can keep using to talk to the media about. So, you know, and I think the other thing about PR is a lot of founders have quite high requirement for significance, and so they like PR because people can see them as a founder. And so so they get quite obsessed with being mentioned in the media, and it's generally not a great channel. So, you know, there's probably not the best use of time, what I would say.
Yeah, I think that point you make about something being repeatable is so important, because at the end of the day, right, every single business in the world has a customer acquisition cost, a cost to acquire a new customer. And then if you get a bit more fancy with your maths, and depending on industry, you could probably do lifetime values of each individual customer that walks through the door. But marketing is all about getting that customer acquisition cost as low as possible. And typically the only way I've found to do that is to have insights and to have a channel that can be exploited, so that, you know, even if it's like down the street, you get your favorite cafe, you want it to be in a spot where you get the most traffic, right? And then you can test out things. So that's really interesting. Now, one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about, and I know it's super important to you right now, and we're talking about it off air, is building a team, and I guess just the general insights you have, and then maybe we'll drill into a couple of them. But early on in the piece, I know, like you said, you started with the team. What was important to you early on, and how did you go about finding a team?
I mean, yeah, that's a huge topic. Yeah, that's a good topic.
Did you have to convince anyone to join you?
Yeah. Yes, you do. Yeah. So I guess that's a good place to start, right? Initially, as the founder of a business, people don't appreciate it, but you're from the start having to sell your business in a sense, right? Because if I'm going to go and find someone to be a co-founder, unless they're already a great friend of mine, or even if they are a great friend of mine, I'm effectively selling them on the business, and I'm saying, hey, this is a great idea, come and work with me. You know, you won't get paid for 2 years, but you know, it might be really successful one day. It'll be a lot of fun. And the selling is the idea, but you're also selling working with you. You're selling yourself. So you're basically selling yourself, and that then also applies to your early team, right? Usually, as in a business, small business or startup, you're heavily resource constrained, right? So sure, the kind of headline that everyone knows is, yeah, you got to build the best team. You got to build the best team. How am I going to build the best team if I can only pay people like a tiny amount? So you're resource constrained, so you can't always get these incredible people. Now, maybe if you've got a great track record, or you're an incredibly good salesperson, maybe you are lucky enough to persuade people to come join you. But yeah, you're really initially a salesperson. You need to convince people to come on your journey. As you build your track record, that can start to change, and people come to you and they say, oh, I'd love to work for you. I love what you guys are doing. But yeah, initially you have to try and sell yourself to persuade people to join you. And you kind of, I believe you really have to look for the misfits. You have to look for people who probably, you know, there's some reason why they might come and work for you, or maybe that they weren't suited. Like our second programmer that we hired, a fellow called Feng Fu, his English was not great. I mean, so that was why he was struggling to find a job. But okay, guess what? He could learn English with us. It wasn't, you know, we could teach him English and he can help us. So, you know, and so for that reason, that he at that point in time probably made sense, right? We couldn't pay a huge amount because we didn't have a huge amount of money. So, so you have to make those hard decisions, and that's one of the difficult things when you read all this advice of building your team. It is people saying, oh yeah, you gotta do all this, but you know, you're resource constrained. It's really, really hard. I do think though it's really important, depending on the business, I generally think it's best to have a business partner. I don't know about yourself, Owen, if there's anyone else you work with, but if you don't have a business partner or someone else, you at least need someone to share the role of the business partner. And that would be someone to talk to when you have problems, someone to bounce ideas off, someone to help you make decisions. Even though there's a lot of successful businesses that appear to have single founders, usually they were not single founders, and usually they had people next to them playing those roles. I think most people work better with someone else.
So for me, that's my wife.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, exactly. So yeah.
So she was the sugar mama and the business partner, if you like. So she funded the dream and provided oversight, which I think is so important, right? So the early days. Then what about now? I imagine you're at that point where it's funny how the world works, but I imagine you're at that point now where people want to work for you. Like you probably get people coming to you saying, "I want to work for you," because of what you've created. How do you now go about finding people? Is it a simple seek ad? I know you got your website. How do you find people? How do you find good people?
Yeah. Well, this is crazy because only a few months ago did we actually have someone come in and now actually help us to do what we call talent acquisition. Before it was us doing it. So, it's a huge, just not distraction, but it's a huge, it takes a lot of time to find great people. So,
it does, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like, hey, we need to build this thing. Oh, but we also need to hire people. Oh, well, we can't do both. So, I think one thing that is really important to say that at the end of the day, it's only by hiring great people that you have a great business, and have a great team. Now, it's nothing wrong with having a small business. If it's just you, that's totally fine as well. You're the great person. You know what I mean? So it's always about people. I think once you're in that position where people are, I guess, coming to you, and we're quite lucky. I guess also because we're consumer facing, we have like quite a wide reach. So you do get a lot of people who do email in saying, "Oh, I really want to work for you guys." The way we do it now is we actually have quite a, I guess you could say, thorough process to actually be hired, and people have to do these take-home challenges, which can take anything from a day to a week, depending how much time you want to spend for it. Then they come in, then we sit down with them, because it's a really, really big decision to hire someone, at any size. So you really want to make sure, ideally, that you've got the right person and they're going to be a good fit for you. So I think just being really thorough, and I think really focusing on, it's not so much about skills. The right people should be learners and they can learn. It's more about the values and how that you can see yourself working with those people. So the hiring's fun. You can meet new people like that's what changes your business. So that's also a lot of fun.
Sounds like the first part of that kind of hiring process for you now then is, dare I say, more of like a technical thing. Like, do you have the skills, kind of understanding people? And then the second or third or fourth stages might be more the values. Would that be fair?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what we do now for most roles, we try to assess the base skills as early as possible, so that basically we don't want to waste their time or ours. So, for example, when we're hiring programmers, we would get them to apply via an API, which effectively filters out really bad programmers. If, for example, you're applying for an equity analyst position, we'll ask you some simple challenges, and if you get those wrong, then we know that probably need to go back and do a bit more studying. So just simple stuff like that you can kind of you can filter out early. I think going back to it, I would say that, like I said, that early on and even now, you should still be expecting to have to sell, right? So guess what? The best people are probably already working somewhere. So you probably are going to need to sell. You really are going to have to go out there. And so you really got to think of how you're going to do that. It's kind of a bit like dating, I guess. You really got to think, how can you make yourself stand out? What's special about you? What can you offer this person that's going to make them say, wow, this is actually a great opportunity for me? Most people are not money driven. Most people are driven by other things. And so you got to understand people's drivers, what's really important to them. Certainly when you first start out, you are going to be, reaching out to a lot of people, I think, to try and persuade them. And having a good network is powerful as well. I think it's slightly underestimated that if you know you're going to start a business, you can at least start building a network in that business before you start it, so that you're not a total stranger,
Totally. Yeah. Great. It's a great idea and great insight. I I guess there's one more topic area here before I just get to some evergreen questions on the end, mate. The the most important thing, I guess, for any business and for any founder or business starter is to have the founder and business starter hanging around in the first place. So, what for you keeps you motivated? Like, is it working with great people? Is it seeing that the growth? Like, what is it each day that kind of just keeps you getting up and going to work?
I mean, I guess I have a lot of variety, whether it's, fires or new exciting things or so there's always ups and downs and things that are going on. So yeah, at the end of the day though, I love working with great people, and I love solving these challenging problems. That's what really gets me out of bed is, I don't think anyone's, like I said, no one's really figured out how to really help retail investors yet. And that's what we want to do. So I think that's what excites me, is trying to solve these hard problems and see if we can actually come up with a way of doing that, and at the same time working with great people doing it.
You said before we spoke that you don't think you're the best manager. So
yeah,
you said that you're not the right, like you just don't have those skills necessarily, or what it might be. If you, in spite of that, because I feel like that may be a sense that you're being humble, so that maybe makes you a good manager in that regard. What, if any, advice would you have for people as they transition to becoming a manager and kind of remove themselves from the tools? What advice would you have for people there? Is there anything in particular?
First of all, you don't have to be good at everything. It's very unlikely that you are, Often the people that might be great managers might not be the best founders, for example, Some people believe that you're either a manager or a leader. It's hard to be both. There's different opinions there. I think the first thing is just being aware of where your skills are and where they're not, right? Because as your business grows, if you are aware that you're not the greatest manager, then either you can work on it. It's something that you can learn. Obviously, some people are much more natural at it than others. But you can still learn to be better, and you learn to spot the mistakes that you've made. Or you can get people to help you. It's the same as if you're starting a technology business and you're not a programmer, you're probably going to need a programmer, So it's like, the whole point of when you build a team is you want to be balanced in terms of what your of the different skill sets. So I think awareness is really key there. And probably start learning about these things maybe a bit sooner than you think. That being said, I think I said earlier, like the initial thing you got to focus on is just making sure you're solving a problem for people, right? Like I said, you could be the best manager in the world, but if your business isn't solving a problem, then it's all very nice, but you need to solve the problem first. So I think you need to make sure you start to get on that sort of road. And then, then you can start working on your management skills, which is always a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think it's great advice, mate. I feel like there's a lot of good takeaways from this conversation. I feel like we've only scratched the surface on a lot of them. If I could summarize that last answer for you there, in my words, it would be that it's okay to hire people that are really good at things and even better than you are. I feel like that's something that I kind of was worried about, is like not knowing everything and not knowing everything that goes on inside the business. You kind of need to hire people that are exceptional to get the best results. And sometimes because they're exceptional, they're better than you are in certain respects. What is it now, if you're looking just at the business today, is the thing that you're the most proud of is just helping people and being able to help so many?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely happy with that, but I say because I'm like, oh, well, we could be doing an even better job, like I still know it can be better. And so I'm like, yeah, I think we've made good progress. I think I just know there's things I want to do even better there. It's probably something that will never stop, if that makes sense, I am proud of, I guess, the progress we've made. It probably took us longer than we expect, but like I said, I think every founder, business owner experiences that. And I also think that there's not many other businesses out there that genuinely are helping people. I think that's something that I'm really proud of. That, you know, that's still the way that we try to build our products. We're not trying to, how can we make money out of these confused retail investors? We're trying to say, how can we actually help people? And that's similar to your business as well, I know. So, yeah, and I think also the team that we've hired here, you know, it's incredible, and that's something that I'm really proud of as well. It's taken us a long time to figure out how to hire great people and how to get them to work together in the best environment. But that's something that really makes me happy, and there's a lot more of that to come. So that's going to be super exciting.
Yeah, my last question was, what are you most excited about? And I feel like, did you just answer it?
What I'm most excited about, having I guess empowering retail investors, really. Like, you know, I really think that with this interesting thing, right? Think about it like this. If I'm a billionaire, right? Or if I'm, I don't know, living in a slum in Brazil, both those people still use Gmail. Both those people still use WhatsApp, right? So technology is amazing like that because it's totally democratized. You know, I'm not having some special billionaires email system or special billionaires chat system. And I really believe it can be the same with investing, that you actually have exactly the same tools, even more powerful tools, and that there's no disadvantage. If anything, there could be an advantage because you can be super nimble. You don't have to answer to your, you know, the LPs in your fund and all this thing. So I think I'm really excited about changing investing in that regard to actually really empower individuals and make them successful investors. And I think it's totally possible. I just think no one's really cracked it yet, and that's what we're going to do.
Mate, that is super exciting, and I can't wait to watch on from the outside. So thank you for just taking the time out and sharing some of your insights with us, mate. Really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thanks a lot, Aaron. A lot of fun.